Soldiers speak out. We can tell the truth of what we've seen. We are not liars. Soldiers speak out. We have a duty to all children and to their futures. Soldiers speak out.
And tonight we have a very special topic, and that is, how do you get out of the Army? How do you get out of the service? It's so easy to get in the service, but then the time comes to leave the service, and there's some things you need to know. And so I've invited some friends here that are here to give me some firsthand experience, because it's been a number of years, let's call it decades, since I exited the service, or ETS. And so I want to thank Rick and Donna for being here. And I'm just going to ask Rick now. Rick, what is the normal process for getting out of the service? How long does it take? What do people normally do?
Well, most soldiers do what we call an ETS, which stands for Expiration of Term of Service. That would be the standard way that you get out of the Army. When you first enlisted, you signed up for 3 years, 4 years, up to 6 years, whatever it is you signed for. Mm-hmm. And you've completed your term, or you're nearing the end of your term, and your ETS date is coming up. And that's kind of how it's talked about, when do you ETS? I'm getting ready to ETS.
Yeah, I talked to a veteran today, and she was getting ready to ETS next month. And so that means that her enlistment contract has been completed, and she's getting ready to leave, and they say goodbye.
Yeah.
You turn in all your equipment and leave.
Yeah, and it starts a few months out. There's some things that have to happen before you can actually just drive away. You have to turn in all your gear, and there's a process for that. And there's a process that the installation has that verifies that all these things have taken place, that you turned in all your gear, you don't have any overdue library books, you didn't write a bad check to the commissary or whatever it is. And there's ACAP, which has recently made some changes, and I'm actually,
ACAP, for our listening audience that are not sure of what that is all about.
The Army Career and Alumni Program, and this is a program that's been around for a while. There's been some recent changes to it.
Okay.
What they do, or what they're designed for, is to help a soldier prepare themselves for civilian life in the way of learning how to write a resume, mock interviews, how to find a job kind of stuff, how to get your college benefits, where you're going to go to school, those sorts of things. Some of the recent changes I'm actually a fan of, but all in all, I'm not sure that the ACAP process is really doing the job that it's designed for, or that they might think that it takes care of.
That's the normal process. A person really is leaving and they can't think of a physical or mental health issue that would be causing them to have some concerns about leaving and not taking care of that. Are there things that active duty soldiers need to start collecting before they get out of the service that would help them when they ETS?
Well, there's some things that they're going to make you collect, that you're going to have to go around and get certain things verified. But other things that I would strongly recommend a soldier finds a way to get their hands on before they get out is their medical records. And the process is not simple. In the civilian world, if you have a doctor, you can go and you tell them you need a copy of your records so that you can go get a second opinion or whatever it is you're going to do. And, they keep a copy because they've seen you, but they'll give you a copy. Well, it doesn't work quite like that in the Army. So, You got to fill out forms. You got to, you have to formally request these things, and you need to formally request them several weeks out. I would probably call it more like a few months out.
So if I have just a week left, then I'm going to be out of luck to try to get some of my service medical records then.
It's going to be very difficult. I would still recommend that you make every effort to. Part of the issue is you have more than one medical record. There's, a master copy, if you will, that's sort of, kept in a database, and you're going to get that through whatever hospital out at Fort Lewis. It'll be Madigan, but, other larger installations will have some hospital. And they'll have the whole version, your whole history, but then your unit will also have, a hard copy in a folder.
So your records are all over the place then?
Your records are all over the place.
So when I left Fort Wainwright in Alaska and ETS'd out of Fort Lewis, I didn't think about records staying in Alaska.
Well, they should have, and I don't know how they did it then, but I know in today's Army, the idea is as you move from post to post, you will hand carry a copy of your unit records, the ones that go with you from battalion to battalion or whatever, however you're stationed. And that's really usually done, whoever sees you first when you go to sick call, those are the records that they're keeping. If they send you to a specialist at the hospital or whatever medical treatment facility is, the next level of care, then that stuff goes into the master records. So you really need both copies.
And those medical records, do they include the doctor's notes?
They do not include the doctor's notes.
Please note for our listening, viewing audience, that question was raised because it's a very important question. Doctors can almost make diagnosis in their doctor's notes, and yet you try to find out, well, I know I have such and such, but it won't show up in the medical record. It is in the doctor's notes. So how do you go about getting doctor's notes?
Doctor's notes are a little bit more difficult to obtain. You'll find even when you get the master copy from your medical treatment facility, this is your overall medical record, it will commonly have a computer printed form or version of your medical records, but it just has diagnoses. It has what type of treatment you received on what dates, but it's very generic, and it does not have doctor's notes. So now to get the doctor's notes, you have to fill out another form. They have to verify with the doctor that it's okay for you to have these, and there are instances where, especially when we start talking about behavioral health issues, where doctors can say that they think it's not in the patient's best interest to have a copy of the doctor's notes.
In the patient's best interest.
Well,
okay.
Their words, not mine.
Okay. Rick, what happens to a soldier who returns from a deployment and something has happened, either physically or mental health-wise? They're back on base. What happens to that person?
Well, there's a couple different ways a soldier could come back home, and one would be if they were medevaced, out of country. And I don't want to speak too much into that. I have never been medevaced, so I'm sure there's some similarities and some differences that I probably don't know about. But a soldier who comes back to country with his unit, he just redeploys, business as usual. There will be a process that we call reverse SRP.
Reverse SRP.
Reverse SRP. Before a soldier deploys, he goes through SRP, soldier readiness process. As he comes back into the United States, at some point in the first 30 days, and it's usually a little bit less, he's going to go through the reverse soldier readiness process. So we're going to make sure that he hasn't come due on any shots and, ask him a bunch of questions. He's going to see some medics and some doctors and some medical personnel. He's going to fill out questionnaires and surveys. And the whole thing takes, about a week. And this would be the time that a soldier really needs to bring up any issues that they're having.
So if they had a physical injury, or for an example, you were involved with a striker brigade, and the strikers had a number of different accidents, and some due to IEDs and others where the strikers crashed into each other.
Sure.
And so a person came back injured.
Yes.
And then during this reverse SRP is where they would say, I'm having trouble with my lower back or my ankle or so, and I need to have that looked into.
And so commonly, soldiers live by just drive on, suck it up and drive
GI
on.
candy.
They just keep going, right? So maybe they saw a medic over there and they got ibuprofen, they stayed off it for a couple days, but it really hasn't healed, and it's bothering them. When they return and they're going through the reverse SRP process, it's not the time to be a hero. This is when they need to raise their hand, come up on the net, so to speak, and say, hey, something's wrong. And I think that, what I've seen is soldiers who do that can get a level of care. Many soldiers don't do it, and it's just the way that soldiers live with suck it up and drive on. Nobody wants to be that guy, but the reverse SRP is the time. That's what the system is there for. Is for a guy to come up on the net and say, hey, something's wrong. And this is, so we're talking about something that's been slow but painful, but not the. If there's obvious shrapnel, bullet wounds, those sorts of things, it's gonna it's gonna get handled in a different channel. Sure.
Now, is this reverse SRP also for people that are getting ready to ETS then as well?
Well, there is a system set up similar to that, but it's not called reverse SRP. As a soldier is preparing to ETS. That there usually is an outgoing physical. Unfortunately, from what I've seen, it's a little too late at that point to really try to do anything big. I mean, if you want to get it into your medical records, now's the time. But if you're going to try to get into a med board process, you're probably a little bit too late at that point.
Now, you did mention that word med board, and I know in the military we're so used to using these different acronyms, med board, PEB board, ETS, and all of a sudden we're soldiers speaking, and only those who have served understand almost what we're talking about.
And even then, it can get confused.
There's a whole list, and then if you're in the Navy, that's a whole different
jargon
language.
and lingo.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you said med board, that sounds like a medical board.
And med board is really a term that has kind of evolved, and it is short for medical review board. Although that could include several different things and versions thereof. Medical review boards, MEBs, MMRBs. But a med board typically refers to a guy who has been injured. He's seen medical personnel. He's seen doctors. He has seen doctors with no change or no improvement for long enough that they come to a determination point and they say that, this issue, whatever it is, whether it's behavioral health, whether it's knee, whether it's your lower back, it's a heart condition, no longer qualifies you to serve. So that's when you begin the med board process.
And then the PEB board?
The PEB is the Physical Evaluation Board.
Okay.
Is part of a med board process. So once you come to that determination point, and that's up to 12 months. So there's a guy who has a significant issue. He goes on a profile, which is what the Army calls a doctor's note that says what you can and cannot do. for up to 12 months, this thing can keep getting re-reviewed every 90 days by a doctor with really no change in your duty status other than some daily activities that the Army doesn't want you
And
to
not being
partake in.
redeployed during that process.
You actually can be redeployed with a profile. In the end, a profile is a recommendation from the doctor to the commander that says, you know, I don't think that this soldier should do these activities, whatever these activities are. If it's very severe, we'll say, where a doctor might be willing to say, you know, really, you're making a mistake, Commander. There are certain profiles that have to be reviewed by a higher authority, but there's a number of day-to-day profiles that a commander, if he's willing to take the risk and responsibility for what might happen to the soldier when he deploys with this issue, he can put him on a plane.
Donna, you were on post when your husband was deployed at least once at the time?
Both times.
Both times. From a wife's perspective, what happens when that soldier spouse returns? What goes through the minds of the spouses that you've encountered? What have they noticed has happened to that person that maybe that soldier spouse doesn't talk about?
There's a great deal of change. And the initial deployment, we were encouraged to get our soldier to talk to us. Unfortunately, I think the Army told them not to talk to us. So there's just sort of this thing where there's a lot of non-communication going on. It's a difficult thing. A lot of marriages don't make it through.
So the spouse knows something's happened. This is not the same person that I sent off on this deployment. The person that came back is not the same. Something has obviously happened.
Well, in the first deployment, it was early in the war, and it was on TV. So I knew when things were happening there.
Not that you were told otherwise. You had to watch it on TV.
Exactly. And Rick would tell me, my husband would tell me he wasn't there or something along those lines, which may or may not have been the case.
Well, and there's many of us that have pretty high security clearances that we wouldn't share what we did or where we were at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. What can spouses do to help their soldier get the help that they need while they're still in the service?
I had to go outside of the Army. I don't know, it was easier for me to go to civilian kind of holistic things to go get help. The Army's pretty good at handing you some pills, but for me, that's never worked. And so, I don't know, I started doing some other things that have helped a great deal.
Oh, thank you. Because we know that it's not just the spouse who's affected by deployment or what's happened.
No, the whole family is.
The whole family is affected. Now, we bring up that term PTSD, and Rick is familiar with that term as I am. And we know that it's not just we who are have served are affected by PTSD. That is passed on through the families as well.
Absolutely.
And I found this when I was visiting a doctor friend in Croatia, that the town's children were traumatized. And I couldn't figure out, how did this happen? They weren't even alive when some of the impacts were going on, but they were affected because of how their parents were traumatized by that experience.
Absolutely, war changes everyone.
It does. Rick, when soldiers come back and they realize that something's wrong, and let's talk about, mental health, and they say, I'm not the soldier that I was, or I can't be the soldier that I was. Something's happened to me. How do I go about getting help while I'm in uniform? Or is that sort of one of those things like they have programs, but you don't avail them
Well, you know, in my opinion, there's some inherent issues wrong with the system. The process would be to go to sick call, which is, you know, for when I was in, and I was in a standard infantry battalion, I would have gone to see my unit PA, physician's assistant. And you go see them, you go to sick call, and you would go to them for, you know, whatever daily issues somebody might have. So if you've got a cold, if you twisted your ankle, or if you think that, you know, man, I got a lot of anxiety and I can't sleep at night, all the classic PTSD symptoms, or anywhere in the middle, you go see your PA first. And the system is sort of set up that way. The PA from there doesn't necessarily make a diagnosis, but you know, they're supposed to be sort of a filter to get you to the right specialist, right? So, you know, if somebody went in with the classic PTSD symptoms, they would likely schedule them at behavioral health, which is what we call mental health in the Army. So they would make them an appointment, and then they would go see, you know, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whoever they get the appointment with at behavioral health. And then from there, the treatment would actually begin, assuming that the diagnosis is made appropriately. The number one problem I see with this issue is that your very first doctor, which is actually a PA, works for your commander.
Not for you.
Not for you. And there's, you know, all sorts of things that are supposed to, you know, have them working for you, you know, oaths and other such. But the reality is they get rated and evaluated by the commander. They're in your unit, and they're still an Army officer. So, you know, when you keep everything in-house like that, you know, for one, does a soldier necessarily want to start talking about issues like PTSD, you know, or many of the other things that come up, or, you know, with some of the TBIs that are out there, guys have all sorts of behavioral things that are going along with it because of some physical thing that's happened to their brain. And, you know, they don't necessarily want to talk about that with somebody who has the ability to talk to their chain of command, to talk to other people that they know, you know. And a lot of things would tell us that, well, you know, they're not going to because, you know, they're a medical professional. But they're, you know, for most guys who are having those sorts of symptoms, there's an automatic suspicion whether it's warranted or not. And so you put a guy in a real bad position by asking him to do that, in my opinion.
So that leads to why a number of people self-medicate, because they're not getting the mental health issues, or there's that built-in fear of my career might be jeopardized, or I'm up for promotion, and I will say I'm not going to risk losing that promotion.
Well, you know, whether you're going to sick call for PTSD or for a twisted ankle, if you're up for promotion and now all of a sudden you can't run, or, you know, or you're having concentration issues, or you're getting too many colds. I mean, we can't promote a guy like that. And that's, you know, the number one thing that'll keep guys from going to something like sick call.
Well, if a person has been multiply deployed and they do have issues that are behavioral health or mental health, however we want to term that, and it's getting towards the point that they just really cannot soldier on, it's affecting them. What are their processes? What do they do?
Well, if they really can't go to sick call, and I would recommend they just, you know, if you're ever going to suck it up and drive on, that's the thing to suck it up and drive on and go to sick call and deal with whatever it is anybody's got to tell you about it. You know, guys are afraid of the stigma that's going to get attached and all that stuff. You know what? It's time to get honest.
It's not worth dealing with that stigma and not getting the help.
Once you get your DD 214, it doesn't say that on there. It doesn't, and nobody knows, and you don't ever have to deal with those guys again. So, you know, I would strongly recommend that a guy just goes ahead and does it. But you can walk into behavioral health. Now, I don't know that everybody's chain of command necessarily wants them to know that, but you can.
Now, you know, Rick, that I'm an accredited independent VA claims agent, and I work with a number of people to get them VA claims, Veterans Administration claims, for benefits that they have incurred a service-related injury, whether it's a physical or a mental injury. But there is a process when they are in the service. I'm used to seeing people when they're out. They're truly a veteran. Explain to our viewing audience, particularly because we have active duty soldiers that say, well, gee, how do I get to this DOD compensation or VA compensation? What process is there? Because do I have to wait till I get out in order to get this VA thing going?
No, you don't. There's, you know, the MedBoard system has evolved into the IDES system, the Integrated Disability Evaluation System. And if a soldier is found with a physical or behavioral issue that no longer meets the qualifications for service, and they start the MedBoard or the new IDES system, then really what's happening is they will go into a process where they're being evaluated and assessed by doctors and raters, not by, you know, Army folks necessarily.
So these are VA type of people, or?
They do the VA side of the house, and they do the Physical Evaluation Board side of the house. So they do the Army and the VA system almost simultaneously. And the advantage to that is that your VA claim is being processed while you're being out processed.
And you're still in the service, but that VA claim is there. Now, there is a reason that soldiers may want to explore this, particularly if they are eligible for this MedBoard process. And one comes not only the compensation from the DOD, but Donna, as a spouse, that is something that we encourage soldiers to explore if they can take the time to stay in, because sometimes that's a painful thing. We know that there are people that stayed in 12, 14 months, they hadn't intended to, but they came out with 70% plus DOD, which then means you as a spouse has access to the medical system, the commissary, other type of things. Otherwise, if, let's say, Rick did not go through the DOD process, but just waited till he got out and was eligible to get VA benefits, you would not necessarily get the same as the spouse whose husband went through the DOD VA combination and got that.
That's exactly right. If a guy goes through the MedBoard process, the IDES, and he's rated by the Army for his condition, he's found unfit for service for his condition, whatever it is, and he's rated at 30% or more, then he gets a retired ID card, and he's entitled to whatever percentage retirement, which is based off his base pay, and there's a bunch of calculations. But nonetheless, he's retired from the service.
Even though he hasn't done his 20 years.
Right.
Okay.
And so he does. He keeps an ID card, and his spouse, his children, his family members, within some guidelines and regulations, are, he's retired, and they have TRICARE. The TRICARE converts to retired TRICARE for life instead of TRICARE Prime and all that. But they still have access.
And pharmacy as well.
And pharmacy, medical care, you know, all the post activities that would go along with being retired, and that's
And so that's through the Department of Defense.
And that's the DOD, you know, and I don't know about the other services, but you know, I'm pretty sure that they have something similar set up.
Now the VA comes in as well as far as the benefits for service-connected injuries on that one. And one thing that our viewing audience may not be aware of, particularly soldiers who go through that med board and get the DOD compensation, the VA side is not as thorough as some VA claims process because they only investigate and test for those things that are keeping the person from being retained. And so you may have some, you know, we have what we call a head-to-toe intake form. And you can come up with 17 different things on there, but the DOD one that works with the VA says, well, there's only really about 7 on here, not 17. And yet there really are. The medical records, everything else, the service medical records say, yes, that is correct, but it's not enough that would prohibit you from staying in the service. So they don't process it. And so what I've learned on that one is it's nice to get that pre-discharge through the VA going there, but they're not as thorough on that one because it's only the things that would keep them from being retained.
Right. The VA will look at and, you know, potentially if it warrants, rate many conditions that the Army won't even really consider. They'll even acknowledge that it's there. It's just not their concern because it doesn't render you unfit for service.
Yes.
And that's really all the physical evaluation board is concerning themselves with.
Well, and one of the interesting things, and probably important too, is that even if a person is 0% rated, it brought up, for instance, my right knee could be, well, 0% rated. But 10 years later, arthritis is set into that knee. Now you can go back and say, I want to amend that claim, which was 0% rated. My knee is really hurting. They can come back in and say, yes, that knee is there. As a matter of fact, it's probably about a 30%, and they will compensate you back to when it was 0% rated. So,
and the VA will do that.
Yes, the VA.
Army won't have anything to do with
no,
that.
No.
So, yeah, the Army's they're only gonna rate you for whatever concerns them and your continued service, and that's, you know, that is the way it's set up right now.
Now we often say to soldiers, there's a number of documents that you should collect. Do you remember some of those documents that you've been asked to collect too that could be helpful?
Well, my number one concern is always medical records for these guys. Medical records. DD 214. When you get your DD 214, I know it can be frustrating, but before you sign it, make sure everything's on there. Because once it's signed, there's no going back and trying to put an award on there or, you know, and there are, you know, for Purple Hearts and things like that, there are some benefits out there depending on what state
combat
you're in.
badge, combat infantry,
combat badges,
combat medical, just a number, CAB, CIB.
And if they're not on there, once you sign it, you own it.
And the reason that we do mention that particular one is the VA is a lot easier in saying they take your word. If you have a combat infantry badge, they'll take your word for it that you are in a particular area. It'll be on your DD 214, but they'll take your word for that. And so you don't have to have nearly as much documentation if you have that particular badge.
Sure, some of these things will kind of, they will prove that you were in certain parts of the world at certain times. You know, if you've got campaign stars on your Iraq or Afghanistan ribbon, that pretty much guarantees that you were in that part of the world during the conflict. If you've got CABs or CIBs, that pretty much guarantees that you saw some level of combat. If you've got valorous, awards and ribbons, medals, these things all, tell the story. And so you got to make sure it's up to date.
One of the things that I didn't do, but I tell veterans that come in, particularly if they're still in the service, try to get buddy statements. If something's happened to you, it's not always necessary, particularly if you have the combat infantry badge, but if you were there when something happened to Rick, they can say, yeah, I was there. Matter of fact, I was in the next Stryker vehicle, and observed on such and such a date. And afterwards, golly, he had a headache and, well, he was knocked out for a period of time, Well, that goes a long ways to saying, there could be some residual from traumatic brain injury. Really? How do you know so? Well, here's the buddy statement that Sergeant so-and-so wrote for me. And, I don't remember one person that I was in the service with, but, a lot of times you are very close to a person, and that would be the time to start exchanging those buddy statements to keep in your file. That can be very helpful.
And if you've recently redeployed and you're getting ready to get out or start a med board process, now's the time to get them before you potentially lose touch with them.
Yes.
Some years down the road, it may not be so easy to find this guy. So I would definitely, because in the end, we're talking about compensation from the DOD or the VA, and so their bureaucratic checks and balances is, well, we need to know that this actually happened in combat. And so how do you go about proving that? Well, the awards, the medals, the ribbons, the buddy statements, all these things, they tell the tale.
Okay.
And you got to be able to do that because they're going to question it.
So if a person comes back, they are affected, of course, by the experience that they've gone through. They're getting ready to leave. It's taken them some time to get out of the service. How do they hold it together and still be part of a unit or something if this has taken such a long time?
How do they hold it together? Well, unfortunately, most guys not very well. And that's, I don't put that on them. There is a unit out there, the Army has a unit called the Warrior Transition Unit, the Warrior Transition Battalion on some posts. And what this was designed for is sort of a transitional holding tank. Guys who are going through the med board process. We've determined that they do, in fact, have some issue that makes them unfit for service. And they're going to be getting out. They can't work for a regular unit. Send them to the WTU, WTB. The number one problem I've seen with the WTUs and WTBs is they just don't have the room. There's all kinds of guys walking around out there that probably should be in a WTU or a WTB, and they won't accept them. They have too many more difficult cases. I've seen guys when they're all said and done get rated pretty highly by the Army and the VA, which to me indicates that they clearly had some significant issues. They probably should not have been working in a regular infantry rifle company or engineer company or hanging out on the range or doing any of the other daily activities that the regular Army has for you. But they couldn't get into the WTU. And they couldn't get in because there's an assessment, there's a board that meets, they review the case, and they vote on it, and they say, hey, yay or nay, right? But that yay or nay is not necessarily based on whether or not he should be. It's whether or not he should be and we have the room. So unless a guy is really we don't know what's going to happen if we let him walk around, they don't have room for him.
Then where does this person go before they can ETS?
Well, they're typically they're left in their regular unit. Whatever unit they deployed with, came back with, raised their hand at SRP, started the med board process, that's where they're going to spend the rest of their days until they get out.
But as a soldier, my PTSD is not getting healed. It's a long-term type of a thing. And if you tell me I'm supposed to see a psychologist, it's like in 6 weeks. So that's hardly adequate mental health type of thing. And so I just have to suck it up for that period of time
I'm
until
really
my
sorry
ETS.
to hear that, Dennis, but it's time to get back to work.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
That's really what it is. Yeah.
And that is how it's addressed on a day-to-day basis. You know, the regular units have their mission to take care of. And I won't get into what I think of their mission, but in their mind, they have their mission to take care of. And a soldier who is unfit for duty is really just a pain to have around. You know, and they're going to find some busy work for him, and they're going to try to keep him out of their hair. And, you know, if he acts up, well, you know, we'll find something to do with him, kind of thing.
Now, when you enlisted, well, let's go back. Why did you enlist?
Why did I enlist? Well, I'll tell you, you know, really what it comes down to. And from all the guys I've talked to, and I served for quite a few years. All the guys I talked to when I was in, what I've really started to gather is that people join the Army because it looks good from where they're at. You know, most guys they're looking for a job. Maybe they're recently married with a young kid, and you know they're looking for income and medical care. But usually, maybe they're looking to get out of their small hometown. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, it looks good from where they're at. And, you know, I would say today, man, if the Army looks good from where you're at,
get a new pair of glasses.
Yeah, you might want to take a look at what you're doing. So, yeah.
We have just a few minutes left, Donna and Rick. What would you tell our viewing audience that they need to know about helping the person get out of the service? Donna, do you have any parting shots about how you could help your soldier, husband, spouse, friend get out of the service?
It's really difficult to know what to do. In most cases, for long periods of time, you know something's wrong with your spouse, but you don't know what to do about it. And I know before Rick was able to raise his hand, went to a lot of people and said, hey, you know, this is the deal. And nobody would listen. So I don't know. It's really up to the soldier. It's as a spouse, you just got to try and remain supportive and try to let them make the decision. But I don't know how to put it. Emphasize that it needs to be made.
Well, we'll list on this screen some of the resources that a person can write off and call, because I know that there are some that are in emotional health that they can get help on, and some on counseling as well. Any parting comment that you might have on successfully getting out of the service with the benefits that you have earned?
I think that's probably a very important statement, the benefits that you've earned. And I think guys need to look at it like that, you know, that they have earned them. And so there's nothing wrong with raising your hand. If there's something wrong, you need to do that. Guys just need to get honest with themselves about it, I think, in most cases. You know, as soldiers, we were trained to suck it up and drive on. You're trained to, you know, to fight through the pain. And when you're trained to do that and you're indoctrinated in it and you do it for so long, and all the guys around you are doing it, guys know that there's something wrong. but they don't want to say anything about it. They're just going to get out, and then they're going to try to go to the VA. And if you have a real issue, I would strongly recommend that you say something sooner than later.
Well, Rick, I want to thank you for being brave and sharing what it takes to get out of the Army. It's so easy to get in nowadays, but getting out can be a little more challenging with the benefits that you deserve. And Donna, thank you for being the spouse that has been there through multiple deployments and understands what it means to help your husband on that process. We want to thank our viewing audience who have learned a few things, what it takes to exit the service with the benefits that they need, both from the Department of Defense and from the Veterans Administration. And we'll put some more credits on our screen so that you can write and get more information about claiming your VA rights there. Thank you for watching. Hello, I'm Dennis Mills. I'm a veteran, and I work with counseling veterans.
I'm Mark Fleming, also a veteran, and I also work counseling veterans.
And we would like to tell our viewing audience, particularly those of you who are active duty or near to becoming a veteran, on veterans benefit assistance.
Yes, Dennis and I are at Coffee Strong outside the gates of Fort Lewis every Friday, and we're available from 10 to 2 to assist you in understanding the VA system, learning about the benefits you have available, how to access them, how to make claims. If you have a pending claim, we can assist you with that. Or if you're in active duty, just thinking about what you may need or be eligible for, we can provide you with that information.
We encourage you to come Fridays at Coffee Strong. That's just off of exit 122 near Lakewood, literally at the gates of Fort Lewis. To come with your DD 214 in the military records that you have, and we can assist you in getting the benefits that you deserve for the service that you provided.
We're learning more as we go, as we talk with veterans and we talk with active duty. So every time we meet with someone, we learn something new, and along the way we're able to help you apply for those benefits.
You deserve the benefits that you've earned, so come in to Coffee Strong on Fridays 10 to 2.
Soldiers, speak out. We can tell the truth of what we've seen. We are not liars. Soldiers, speak out. We have a duty to all children and to their futures.